Hi, my name is Caroline, and I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about my experience having had Lyme disease and then getting sick with COVID-19. So first, just a little bit more about me and my health history. So 6 years ago, I woke up one day with a migraine that never went away. Over the next few months, it just kept getting worse. I had headaches constantly. I was nauseous, vomiting. I was hypersensitive to all stimuli, so lights, sounds, smells. I developed this very fun thing called visual snow, which is when your entire field of vision looks like a static television, and that is 24/7. I started getting fatigue, brain fog. It was really achy. And then I started having numbness and tingling in my feet. And so I'm sure this will sound familiar to all of you. I went on a medical tour of New York City. I saw a GP, 5 different neurologists, a endocrinologist, an OBGYN, an acupuncturist, an osteopath, and finally a nutritionist. And the nutritionist was the one who tested me for Lyme disease and diagnosed me with having Lyme, and then I ended up receiving treatment. And that was about 9 months after my symptoms first started, which for me felt like a very long time, but I know in the world of Lyme, I came out pretty lucky with getting it within the first year. So by then, it had triggered a bunch of autoimmune issues, and I ended up going to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and I attended their pain rehabilitation center, which was 9 to 5 every day, 5 days a week for a month, so 160 hours of physical therapy, occupational therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and mindfulness. And the goal was basically to learn how to manage your chronic symptoms, chronic pain and fatigue, so that they are still there, but they no longer dictate your life. So since that program, I live by a pretty strict set of rules that keep my symptoms in check. I wake up at the same time every morning. No matter how I feel, I get out of bed, I get dressed, I make breakfast, I make my bed, and I do my stretch routine. I go outside every single day. I exercise at least 3 days a week. Doesn't matter how I feel. I meditate twice daily. I do breathing exercises. And the biggest thing was I got rid of my pain behaviors, which my boyfriend Ian thinks should be the name of a heavy metal band. But it's just, those things that remind your brain that you're experiencing pain. So for me, that was not talking about how my body feels. It was stopping putting ice on my head every time I got a migraine. It was stopping weekly massages. It was stopping wearing sunglasses indoors. It was stopping wearing earplugs in noisy restaurants. And in addition to all of that, I also was diagnosed with autoimmune encephalitis, and I received 3 years of monthly IVIG infusions. And so between all of that, I got to a place where I was really doing pretty well. Last year, I was able to move out of my parents' apartment and move in with Ian. I finished a draft of my novel. I got my first real job offer since I got sick, and I was able to stop seeing my therapist on a weekly basis. So things were going pretty well. And then in January, I read about the coronavirus. And at first I was a little dismissive, but then I kept reading about, how contagious it is, how fatal it is, and how it's especially harmful for people with pre-existing conditions. So I started to get a little bit more nervous. And at the end of January, it hit me all of a sudden. I was at a doctor's office, and as I was sitting there, I started to think, well, what if someone got sick with the coronavirus and they came to New York City? Wouldn't their first stop be a doctor? And what if it was this doctor? And what if it was this office? And what if the coronavirus was everywhere? And I'm not proud of this, but I panicked. I told the receptionist that I had a family emergency, and I ran home. I threw away my reusable water bottle because it had touched surfaces in the office. I got home, I put all my clothes into a garbage bag, immediately got into a shower, and waited for Ian to get home with Lysol so he could wipe down my jacket and my phone and my shoes. I was a little bit embarrassed. I told my sister and I told one friend, and then I went back to seeing my therapist again. And what she said really was helpful. She said, you know, you were bit by a tick and you got this mysterious illness with no vaccine and no known cure, and it took over your body and it derailed your life. And right now you are being bombarded with news about another mysterious illness with no vaccine and no cure that is taking over people's bodies and derailing their lives. She said, you know, it makes a lot of sense for that to be re-traumatizing. So I tried to treat my anxiety with kindness. I took every possible precaution. I bought something called a phone soap, which is this box where you put your phone in and it shoots UV lights to kill the germs. Not sponsored, just a big fan. I got a UV wand that heat cleans flat surfaces. I started carrying Purell everywhere. I washed my hands obsessively. Whenever Ian came home, I made him change and shower immediately. I deleted Twitter from my phone. I stopped watching the news. I asked people not to talk to me about the coronavirus, not to talk about it in group threads. And I just tried to continue to live my life. But I was still really on edge for all of February. I started having trouble breathing. I actually ended up seeing my doctor just because I was having so much trouble breathing. I would go out in public and I would be sitting in a concert and I would hear people cough near me and my body would just react and I would start crying without even realizing it. And then at the beginning of March, the coronavirus was now this pandemic, and all of a sudden everyone else was just as freaked out as I had been. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit validating all of a sudden to not be in the minority and for everyone else to also think this is really scary. And so that was the first week of March, and I live in New York City, and that's when things started to shut down. People started to work from home. You know, people were starting to be really careful. But Ian is a public school teacher and schools were not yet closed. So he was still going into work every single day. And I was just sitting at home panicking. I was so scared for him and I was scared for myself because I had no idea what having these pre-existing issues would mean if I got sick. And that first week, I remember I felt like, you know, those World War II movies, which are really about the men, but then they occasionally cut back and you see the wife sitting at home and crying and worrying. I felt like I was one of those wives. Like my only job was just to be at home and worry about Ian at work. And then on March 9th, I started to feel a little run down. I had a low fever. I was nauseous, but I'd been so careful, and I'm sure you all know those are things that are not that abnormal. So I figured that I was fine. But then Ian started to cough, and he was lucky enough to be able to get a test at the urgent care near us. And I still didn't think that he was sick. I didn't think that I was sick, but I didn't want to take any risks. So over the next few days, while we were waiting for the test, my symptoms started to get worse. My fever spiked. I was so congested I couldn't breathe through my nose. I was so tired, so run down. I have chronic fatigue, so I thought I would be prepared. But with this, I couldn't stand up without my legs feeling like they were going to buckle. I was having trouble focusing. And then Ian's test came back and he was positive for COVID-19. And my doctor said that because we live together in the same small apartment and because I have all the same symptoms, that I should just assume that I had it too. So Ian's symptoms were pretty standard for a healthy 30-year-old man. He had an upper respiratory cough. He had a low fever for about 5 days. He had bad fatigue and headaches, and he was dizzy and weak. But his symptoms mostly resolved within 2 weeks. I wasn't so lucky. As I said, the first 5 days were pretty mild, and then that's when the fever spiked, and the congestion and the brain fog, that it was hard to follow conversations, it was hard to watch movies. I really just sat on the couch and played games on my phone, and I lost my sense of smell. And so I had a fever somewhere between 99.3 and 102 for 12 days. And then the fever resolved to be replaced by an insane amount of sweatiness. It was so sweaty. And then the rest of my symptoms stayed the same. Then I started to get a cough, and it was like a wet, croupy cough. I was coughing up a lot of yellow phlegm. And I told my doctor, and he prescribed me an antibiotic in case the virus had caused a bacterial infection in my lungs. So I started the antibiotic, and it seemed to help for a few days. But during those days when my cough got better, I got diarrhea instead. So it was not really the vacation from the virus that I was hoping for. And then the cough got worse. It dried out, and it was this deep, dry, rattling cough. And that's really when I was scared. It was so bad that it hurt my chest. It made my whole body convulse. I felt like I could taste blood. It made me shake so much. It would throw my head around so that Ian had to brace my head with both of his hands, because the force of my head moving with the cough was making my migraines worse. And that lasted about a week or a week and a half. And as soon as that started to get a little bit better, the stomach issues got worse. And so I had diarrhea, I had nausea, I had stomach pains. And I remember I told Ian that if I make it through COVID without pooping, without coughing so hard that I pooped myself, I would consider it a success. And it was a success. So it was very exciting. And then about 4 weeks to the day since my symptoms started, I woke up and it was like a fog had lifted. I was still really, really run down, but I could think clearly for the first time in a month. And I was actually able to go out and leave my apartment and take a walk for the first time in a month. And then that was now almost 3 weeks ago. And the past 3 weeks have just been a very, very slow recovery. Every day I'm gaining a little bit more strength. I'm able to walk a little bit further. My sense of smell is fully back. My cough is gone. And every few days, every week or so, I have some intermittent resurgent symptoms, which is pretty normal. So like stomach issues and really bad weakness in my arms and some tightness in my chest, but no shortness of breath. And so my doctor says that given my progression, he expects me to have a full recovery, which has been something that I just keep reminding myself every day because it's taking a long time and it can get frustrating. So I think that the hardest thing for me was I think that my pre-existing issues made it so that when I got COVID, I got it harder and I got it longer. And what was really, really challenging is that, as I said earlier, I do a lot of behavioral things every single day that help me manage my chronic symptoms. And all of a sudden, those things were not possible. I was sleeping 10 or 11 hours a night. I couldn't set an alarm. I couldn't exercise. I could hardly stand up. I couldn't keep my regular work routine. I couldn't avoid talking about my symptoms. I had to scan my body. I had to pay attention to how I felt. I had to tell them to my doctor every day, to my mom who was calling me every night. And so it was challenging, and I had to remind myself again and again and again that this is acute. And so you have to treat it differently than you do something that's chronic. And it was a hard message, but I tried to remember it. So that was how my Lyme progressed, or how my COVID progressed. And look, it's a scary time. It's a scary time to be in this world. It's a scary time to be in this world with Lyme disease, a chronic illness, and a compromised immune system. But there is some good news. Those of us who have been through medical things before, by now, we mostly have a pretty good medical and emotional support system. We know what we're doing. We've been through this before. We can do it again. We're used to living with uncertainty. We're used to living with fear. We're used to living with the idea of indefinitely and not knowing how long something's going to take to get better. And those are all things that are really big strengths right now. And then, of course, the biggest cherry on top is that if you get COVID, you officially get to say that you have Corona and Lyme. So I have a few questions that I got from the Project Lyme Facebook and Instagram, so I'll just go through those. The first one is from Brittany on Instagram, and she asked, were your COVID-19 symptoms similar to your Lyme disease symptoms? So my neurological symptoms were pretty similar. The brain fog, the fatigue, the muscle weakness, those were things that I was pretty used to and that felt like symptoms that I've had. The headaches, I had a migraine for about 3 days early on. So those were all things that were similar, but everything else was completely unlike anything I've felt before. I've never had a cough like this. I've never had an infection that affected every single system of my body. So it was pretty easy to tell that this was something new. And John on Instagram asked, how was your experience with COVID-19 different from someone who didn't have Lyme disease? So I think my understanding is really just comparing my experience with that of Ian, who's healthy. He progressed pretty normal. His was about 2 weeks. He had a cough, he had all the symptoms, but they resolved pretty quickly. And in comparison, my symptoms were more severe, and they just really dragged out a lot longer. And then also John on Instagram asks, how did your Lyme disease affect the way you treated COVID? So again, just in comparison to Ian, we had all the same tools, but I was a lot more diligent about actually using them. I took my vitamins regularly, and I gave myself a lot more time to rest before I began to try to push myself to go outside, just because it was taking a bigger toll on my body. So I think now I would love to introduce you to another person. Her name is Paige Medley. Paige and I went to elementary school together. We went to elementary school and middle school, and then hadn't spoken in 15 years. And then about a month ago, I wrote an article that was on Teen Vogue about getting sick with COVID, and Paige saw it, and she sent me an Instagram message saying that she also had a chronic illness and also was worried about having COVID symptoms. And we have been speaking basically every day since then. So I'm going to let Paige tell you a little bit more about herself.
Hi, I'm Paige. Caroline, thank you. You had me laughing and cringing and all of the things that we've been talking about for the last month together. So thank you for sharing your story with us. So I'm Paige. I have an invisible illness as well that's called POTS. No, it has nothing to do with smoking pot, as my mom first thought when I was diagnosed. It stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And basically, it's a neurological disorder. And when most people stand up, their heart rate rises and their blood pressure rises with it. But for me, when I stand up or sit up, my heart rate rises, but my blood pressure drops. So I either feel like I'm going to pass out, do pass out, etc. So this is another condition that there is no cure for. There are ways that you can maintain it. Luckily, I'm someone who loves salt. So my neurologist tried to get me to go on blood pressure medication. He either told me I had to go on blood pressure medication or increase my salt intake to an insane amount. And I just took the salt and said, yes, absolutely, 100%.
Do you drink pickle juice?
Do I drink apple juice?
Pickle juice.
I love pickle juice. Yes. I love pickle juice. And my body will crave crazy salty things also, like pickle juice. So I think, Caroline, I'm about 2 weeks behind you on the COVID symptoms, right? Is that what we
Yeah,
decided?
I think about that.
Yeah, I'm about 2.5 weeks behind Caroline. So I think one of the things about having an invisible illness, like Caroline, I did the tour de force of doctors in New York trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I had all sorts of weird symptoms because, just imagine every time you stand up, you get dizzy. My doctors had no idea what to do with that information. They tested my hormones. They tested everything that they could think to send out a test for before they started thinking about, the nervous system. And so I think, like Caroline said, one thing that we're all used to with having an invisible illness is this idea of just being really scared and not knowing, when it's going to pass, not knowing when, I call them POTS episodes. I don't know if you have like Lyme episodes, but it's not all the time, but not knowing when the episode is going to pass. Yeah. And that's very much how I think your experience and my experience with COVID has been also. So we also were incredibly careful, washed our hands, washed our clothes, showered, and then took a bath every time I went out of the house. We're completely obsessive about it because, Caroline, I think your doctor coined this term that we're just hospitable hosts having the invisible illnesses that we really do. And it's a great term.
Yeah.
Because
we're just way too polite to those viruses and it never wants to leave.
They just want to stick around with us. And so my husband just got really exhausted. Also, and I've said this to Caroline, this is the only time when it's actually a really great thing to have a pre-existing condition because you can get on the list to get tested for COVID. Mm-hmm. So as many people know, one of the scary things about it is that not everyone is able to get a test. And a lot of people are told, if you have the symptoms, presume you have it and just stay home. But if you have a pre-existing condition like Lyme or POTS or any condition that is further exacerbated by COVID or by a virus or by a regular flu, you have the ability to get tested, which is really lucky. Because I think one other thing that happened to me, and I heard the questions that people were asking on social media, which sounded a lot like, is there a way to differentiate between Lyme symptoms and COVID symptoms, or are they one and the same? And for me, the differentiator is that I had the exacerbated POTS symptoms or neurological symptoms on top of these additional symptoms, right? So these symptoms that never experienced before, never had before in my entire life, by far the sickest I've ever been in my entire life. and they feel like two separate things, with one just being kind of layered on top of the other. Did you have the same experience?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think also something that we've both talked a lot about is how neither of us has ever experienced something that hits every system on your body.
Yeah.
And so we were going through this, and one of the things that I don't think either of us was fully prepared for was how it really does it does not leave any of you alone.
No, not a single part of you. And it is so extreme. Also, something that Caroline and I have been talking about endlessly is our poop. So honestly, if you don't have someone that you feel comfortable talking about poop with, find that person in your life. Caroline and I will give you our email addresses, reach out to us. We will talk to you about it. But it is unlike, I mean, I have lost 14 pounds in the last 10 days. What has it been now? It's been like 10 days that I've been texting you about my poop now.
Yeah.
So, just like find someone you can joke with, because it sucks. It's terrible. It's painful. Like, you have to laugh or you're going to cry.
Yeah. And I think just to have someone that it can be scary. Like,
Definitely.
You, from what you've said, have never pooped in this way in your life.
Never.
I have never coughed in this way in my life. Yeah. And when you're experiencing this new symptom, especially when you feel like you've had every possible symptom in the world, it can be scary. And so find that person who you can talk to, and especially if it's someone with a chronic illness, because I think that they're the people who are able to say, yes, it's scary, but it's normal, and also who are able to remind you, you need to give yourself time to rest. Like Paige and I both every day are texting each other being like, I'm so frustrated, I want to get back. Right now, you have to listen to your body, and what your body is saying is sleep and rest, and you just need to keep doing that.
Yeah. And it's like a process of just temporarily untraining yourself to do all the things that you forced yourself to do I mean, you're never going to fully heal, but to be okay
manage.
Day in, day out, right? Yeah. To manage.
And those things will still be there.
Exactly.
When you're better.
So exactly. They're the tools in your toolbox that you'll have forever, and don't forget about them. Just like put the toolbox in the garage for the 2 weeks or month or 6 weeks or whatever it is that it takes you to feel better.
Yeah. And so Paige and I came up with some like pretty practical advice of how to manage the different symptoms. And again, we are definitely not doctors.
We are not doctors.
Not even close. But we have found a lot of the same things to be helpful. So things for managing the cough. For me, steam showers were critical. I was taking like 2 or 3 a day because it helped to keep the phlegm in my lungs from getting too sticky or gluey. I know for Paige that didn't really work. So what were some things for you?
Yeah. So like I said, standing up and temperature especially really affect me and my neurological symptoms. So I'm very lucky that I have a bathtub. So I was able to soak, just like fully submerge myself in that to try and help, and just on my side. And then also that cough video that you sent me, Caroline, which maybe we can post on
we can definitely post. It's something I saw on Upworthy of a doctor from a hospital in London who gave advice on how to breathe deeply into your lungs, which for me aggravated my cough, but for Paige, I think it was pretty helpful.
It was really helpful for me. And then I also used Tiger Balm, which for me served as like both a Vicks vapor rub and a muscle soother. And in combination with a heating pad, which I still have next to me right here, just on my upper back, which helped soothe both my lungs and the achy soreness. So,
and for me, there was an added bonus because I bought the Vicks Vapor Rub and I opened it and it was completely odorless. And so I thought that it was defective, but actually I just had no sense of smell. And now it's no longer defective because I can smell it again.
Works all of a sudden.
Incredible. And then I mentioned this when I was speaking earlier, but the cough can really take over your whole body. And I started to get pain in my lower back from like it hurtling me around. And so find a place that's comfortable that you can brace yourself. I found it helpful to either on a bed or like in a hallway to put my feet on one side and my arms against the other side, just because that bracing helps you from, shaking too much.
Great suggestion.
And then some tips for managing digestive issues. I think one thing is really to stock up on any type of electrolyte that you can find.
Definitely.
Pedialyte. Someone just told me about a liquid IV, I think is the name. It's pretty good. And then I know this will be familiar for most of the Lyme crowd because I'm sure most of you have been on a ton of antibiotics. So just do the same routine: probiotics, soups, bone broths. And then what sort of food has been helpful for you?
So this is going to sound pretty weird, but when you lose your sense of smell and taste, food that you would normally like just tastes like the texture of the food itself. So I've said this to Caroline a few times. I tried to eat honeydew because melon is one thing that's supposed to be really good for your digestive tract. And it just tasted like mush. It had no flavor. It just tasted like mush. I checked with my husband. Apparently the other half of the melon was delicious.
So weird, only half was bad.
Yeah, I know. But I couldn't eat it because the texture was so unpalatable. So finding foods that you're comfortable with the texture of, which is a really weird thing to think about, but comfort foods that you're really familiar with the texture of, like for me, not healthy at all, but I literally was at the point where I could not keep food in my stomach and I had to have something. So fig Newtons, I was really comfortable with the texture of. Cup of noodles, I was really comfortable with the texture of. These foods that I haven't thought about since I was probably 12 years old. I do not remember the last time I ate a fig Newton, but all of a sudden it was just these textural cravings. And then obviously rice, but at this point I'm not going to eat rice again for a very long time.
And I think also that reminds me, because I was really, really, really nauseous as well. And so I still really wanted to do everything I could to support my immune system. Yeah. And so I found something, it's called Frunuta. I have no idea if it's any good, but it's a zinc and vitamin C supplement that dissolves under your tongue. So I was taking that and I was taking Zicam because those are vitamin C and zinc that you dissolve in your mouth, so you don't need to worry about being able to digest it.
Yeah.
And then we talked about this a lot, but just rest and sleep. I was getting like 10 or 11 hours a night. And my doctor said that to expect the fatigue to be impressive was his word, and for it to be the last symptom to resolve.
Yeah.
And then we both also have some fun little witches brews.
Oh, yeah. Things that have worked for us. Again, we are not doctors.
By any means, 0% of a medical degree right now. But I have two. The first one is from someone who I do acupuncture with, and he said to brew Asian pears, dates, fresh ginger, and cinnamon, and stew them together in hot water. And I also added some turmeric and lemon and oranges. And I don't know if it works, but it tastes very soothing. And then the other one is to combine raw garlic, which if you lose your sense of smell and sense of taste is actually really easy to eat. So garlic, orange slices, orange juice, lemon juice, honey, blackstrap molasses, and hot water. And then I would also throw in an emergency or airborne tablet just to add a little bit extra vitamin C.
Yeah, so we actually haven't had a chance to catch up on this yet, but I lived in an ashram in India for a month. And every day they would make, I don't want to call it a witch's brew, but they would brew something up for me it's super easy. It's just lemon, ginger, and honey. And one of the added benefits of it, obviously, since I couldn't do the steam showers the way you were doing it, was if you take a towel or a blanket or something, be very careful to not set it on fire, but slice the ginger and the lemon and just boil it in a pot, and then put the towel or blanket or whatever you're using over your head and over the pot, and just try to breathe in through your nose and in through your mouth, like switching between inhaling through your nose and mouth. And it really helps clear out the sinuses. And then get a little mug, pour some honey in it, and just pour it directly in there. So that's something that was really soothing for my stomach and sinuses also. And then one other thing I just thought of that was really helpful for me was to get it's going to sound very weird, but a seat in our shower. They have, just stools that are waterproof that you can put in your shower. So when I was too fatigued to do anything, I could literally just go and sit there and not have to worry about the change in posture and temperature and all that affecting my body and like me passing out.
I definitely wish I had one of those.
Yeah.
Because I got so tired. Like my arms when I showered would feel like they were going to fall off.
Yes. You literally get to that level of exhaustion where it's like you're crawling into the shower and it's like, all right, I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah. I know, Paige, you sent me a picture of all the clean laundry that will never be folded. And we have the same thing. Finally did laundry, but then just the effort to actually fold it, it's not worth the energy. So who needs folded laundry?
I remember we talked about when we changed our bed sheets for the first time also, because like I said, my husband got just really exhausted for about 3 or 4 days. And it was in the middle of when I still had the worst of my symptoms. And so we have a second room with a bed in it. So we were kind of trying to self-quarantine from each other because he didn't have symptoms as badly as I did. And not that it probably made a difference, but we were just trying to be extra careful.
We tried the same thing and
it didn't work. Difference, but I don't know, psychologically it makes you feel better, I guess.
Really?
And I remember having to make up the bed for him, and you can just never imagine sheets being so heavy. I really related to those memes of grandmothers who are like, oh, thank you for lifting the milk, Jimmy. Like I just, even holding the sheets, not even the effort of making the bed, but just lifting up the sheets. I was like, how are these so heavy? How
are they so heavy, and how are they making me so sweaty?
Yeah, literally. I've been.
We also had different types of weird. We both had weird sweatiness, but different presentations.
It's funny though, because I have literally been texting her since she's 2.5 weeks ahead of me. I've been texting her every single time I get a new symptom, being like, "Did you get this? How was it for you?" And I get sweaty on my hands and my feet, and that's something that's part of my POTS also. Like I just sweat in those weird places. And then it was so funny because 2 weeks after I first texted that to Caroline, she texted it back to me and she's like, oh my God, I just started getting sweaty on my hands and my feet. And I was like so happy I was able to prepare you for something.
I know, because I've really just been the voice from the future, but now
exactly.
Me too. And that was so great.
I know. So now we're both in this kind of extended period of healing, which is something that, you know, I don't want to say will happen for everyone with an invisible illness, but we are hospitable hosts. It's likely that it'll take longer for it to leave us. And because we have the additional symptoms already, or kind of the standing symptoms, you know, those will flare up, and you'll be really exhausted, and it's okay, you know. I really hope that everyone's work, if they're working right now, is understanding and knows that they're not just dealing with this virus that the entire world is dealing with right now, but, you know, the invisible illness that they have. And it's a great time to talk about it with coworkers, bosses, anyone who you haven't spoken about it with. Because I know for me, my flare-ups are very seasonal. So it's not something I normally talk about or share unless I need to, but sometimes then it's almost too late. So it's a great time to get talking about it.
And I think that's actually a great point about some of the things that I'm hopeful about. I think that this is the first time where our entire culture is speaking very openly about how people are feeling and how their health is progressing. Absolutely. And what symptoms they're experiencing. And I think that that's something I hope that will continue. And I think that's a really, really good shift. This is the first time where everyone is working from home. And I think that that is a level of accessibility that didn't really exist before for people who had difficulty working in office environments. And so I'm also very hopeful that that is going to continue to go ahead. And a lot of these more invisible and intangible symptoms like brain fog and fatigue that most people dismiss because they're like, oh, I've been tired before, or I've been sleepy and had trouble focusing. I think more and more people are experiencing those types of invisible symptoms, and hopefully it will shift the way that we think about them in our culture more widely.
Exactly, and help people be more compassionate for the invisible illnesses that people like us struggle with every day.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks, Paige. I can't wait till I can see you in person after all.
I know. That will really be the day. And we're really hoping that now we are immune from this. And, you know, I think it's scary that so much is still unknown, right? But that's kind of like the illnesses we deal with every day anyway. There's a lot of testing that still has to be done. A lot of work that still has to be done, and we're here for it. Yeah. And we're in this together, right?
Definitely. We all are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also have been doing a little 5-minute meditation that is specifically focused on how to talk to our brains during this time. So would you like to join me?
I would love to.
Great.
Gonna get cozy.
Good. Yeah. So just take a comfortable position. You can be seated or standing or lying down, whatever feels good.
Meditation.
And you can close your eyes. But if it feels more comfortable to keep them open, that's okay. Just either way, let your eyes have a soft focus. You'll still be aware of the room around you, and that's okay. And take a second to notice your feet, where they have contact with the ground or with a cushion. Notice what that contact feels like. Notice your sit bones and your hips. Notice where they contact the cushion or the chair. And just know that you're fully supported so you can sink down. Let your hands rest in your lap, or on your thighs or against your belly. Notice the contact between your hands and yourself. We spend so much of our day stuck in our head, so for these few minutes, you can just be listening to your body. Notice your breath, wherever you feel it, your nose or your chest or your belly. You don't need to breathe any faster or any slower or any deeper. Just notice how you're breathing. And as you breathe in and out, think to yourself, I am safe. I am safe. And as you breathe in and out, think to yourself, I am strong. I am strong. You can let those thoughts expand from this moment and into the future. And as you breathe in and out, you can think, may I be safe. May I be strong. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I be kind. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I be kind. And you can let those thoughts expand outside of yourself. You can think about your family and your friends and anyone that you love. And for them, you can think, may they be safe. May they be healthy. May they be happy. May they be kind. May they be safe. May they be healthy. May they be happy. May they be kind. And let that thought expand even further. Think about all the people who are still at work, everyone who's at home, in our cities, in our country, all around our world. And for everyone, you can think, may we all be safe. May we all be healthy. May we all be happy. May we all be kind. May we all be safe. May we all be healthy. May we all be happy. May we all be kind. The last few moments, bring your attention back to your hands or to your breath. And just know that whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking in this moment is okay. In a few seconds, you'll hear a bell. When you can no longer hear it, you can slowly open your eyes, move your fingers and your toes, and bring your attention back to the room.
What a special meditation for this time. I love that so much.
Thank you. That was inspired by my meditation teacher. Her name is Kimberly Brown at the Interdependence Project. And it's been a very lovely way of just talking to my brain right now.
I really love that. Could you send me the dialogue for it?
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for chatting with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me chat with you. Appreciate it. And we just hope everyone stays safe and takes care of themselves. And yeah.
Yeah. Stay safe, stay sane. And Paige and I are both here if you ever need to talk.
Absolutely. And just take it one day at a time, because jumping into the future and wondering how long it's going to last, or anything like that, is just going to drive you mad. So just try to keep it centered as much as you can, one day at a time. Thanks, Caroline.
Bye.
Bye.